You've probably heard the same money advice your whole life. Buy in bulk, buy quality, max out your retirement accounts, buy instead of rent, pay cash whenever you can. And a lot of that is good advice. There's just one problem nobody mentions. Most of it gets easier and sometimes only makes sense once you already have money. A person with 20,000 sitting in the bank can save money in ways a person waiting on Friday's paycheck can't. They can spend more today to spend less tomorrow. They can wait longer for a payoff. They can survive being wrong. So here's the money advice that sounds universal, but quietly assumes you already have money. Number 10 sounds harmless enough to print on a receipt. Number 10, buy in bulk. The classic warehouse minus store move. Spend 80 today, lower unit price, and save over the next few months. That's the pitch if you have 80 to spare. If you don't, spending 80 today means 80 that isn't there for gas, groceries, or the electric bill. Unit price and affordability are not the same thing. One is a math problem. The other is a cash flow problem. The bulk aisle only saves you money if the money was already sitting there doing nothing. There's also the storage problem nobody mentions on the receipt. A case of something you don't have room for isn't a discount. It's clutter with a coupon attached. Congratulations! You now own 40 rolls of paper towels and a smaller apartment than you started with. Bulk buying is the small version of this problem. Number 9 is the exact same math, except now it's on your feet. Number 9, buy quality so you only buy it once. The modern version of the boots theory. A $180 pair of work boots that lasts years can be cheaper, long-term, than replacing $50 boots over and over. But that only works if you have $180 before you need the boots. That's the whole contradiction. The cheaper long-term option can be the more expensive short-term one. $50 boots break. You buy $50 boots again. They break again. Meanwhile, the $180 pair just sits on a shelf. Expensive today, cheap over 5 years. Useless if you don't have $180 right now. Boots are a $180 problem. The next one has the exact same shape, except the sticker price has a comma and a 0 attached. Number 8, just pay cash for the car. This sounds fantastic. No interest, no payment. You own it the second you drive off the lot. Except the advice quietly starts with a prerequisite. Have $30,000. If you have that much sitting in savings, paying cash can eliminate financing costs entirely, and you get to feel smug in the dealership parking lot while everyone else signs paperwork. If you don't, just pay cash isn't advice. It's a description of a life you don't currently have. And even the person who does have the cash has to ask what draining that much liquidity does to their emergency fund. Paying cash for a car and having no cash left for anything else isn't actually winning. Financing isn't automatically the smarter move. The point is that just pay cash only functions as advice for someone who could already write the check without thinking twice. The car is an optional math. The next one is the advice everyone assumes you're already following, whether you can afford to or not. Number 7, max out your retirement accounts. This one matters because the advice itself is excellent. The problem is one word, just. Maxing a 401k and an IRA in 2026 means setting aside $32,000 a year, before rent, before groceries, before anything else gets paid. There's a difference between retirement investing is valuable and everyone can afford to maximize every tax-minus advantage to count. Someone earning far more than they spend can capture every tax break on the table. Someone whose paycheck disappears into rent and food can't max anything, no matter how much they understand compound interest. The IRS did not write this limit with a rent increase in mind. Same advice, wildly different starting line. So far, this whole list has been about not having enough. The next one flips that. Sometimes having money means you're allowed to owe some.
Number 6, never pay interest. Here's where it gets more interesting. Paying interest you don't need to pay is obviously bad. But wealthy people don't universally avoid debt. They ask a different question. What does keeping my cash allow me to do? A mortgage is the clearest example. Businesses borrow on purpose, and investors borrow against their own assets on purpose. Even an ordinary buyer might rationally finance something instead of emptying an emergency fund. High-interest consumer debt is a different problem. The lesson isn't debt is bad, it's that never pay interest is too simple. What the debt costs, what it's for, what the other options are, and whether you'd still have cash left over all matter more than the flat rule. Interest is one small line on a receipt. The next one is the biggest purchase most people ever make. Number 5. Buy the house instead of throwing money away on rent. Possibly the strongest example on this list. Rent is throwing money away. That's the line you've heard. But buying requires money before home ownership supposedly starts saving you any. There's the down payment, then closing costs, then insurance and property taxes every year after that. Add maintenance, repairs, and HOA fees if you're unlucky. Buying can require tens of thousands of dollars up front, before the first payment. A homeowner with reserves left over can absorb a furnace dying without blinking. A homeowner who emptied everything just to get the keys is one broken furnace away from debt. Buying doesn't always beat renting. It depends entirely on what's left in the account after closing. There's also the timeline nobody prices in. Staying 10 years absorbs closing costs differently than moving in 3. Rent isn't automatically wasted money, and a mortgage isn't automatically an investment. It's a bet on how long you're staying and how much cushion you have if something goes wrong while you're there. Buying a house costs you money you don't have yet. The next one costs you a paycheck you haven't earned yet either. Number 4. Start a business and work for yourself. The internet version of this one is simple. Stop making your boss rich, go make yourself rich instead. What gets left out is everything underneath it. You may need startup capital and go months without predictable income. You still need health insurance and equipment, and you still have rent and groceries while the business finds its footing. A person with savings can buy themselves something a person without savings can't: runway. Money doesn't guarantee the business works. It just buys more time before your personal finances force you to quit. That's the real advantage. Not talent, time. A great idea with no savings behind it is called a hobby. 2 people can have the same idea, the same skill set, and the same work ethic. The one with 6 months of savings gets to fail twice and adjust. The one living paycheck to paycheck gets one shot before rent forces them back to a job listing. That's not a talent gap, it's a runway. And from a distance, the two look exactly the same. The next one is about something almost nobody thinks to price at all: timing. Number 3, wait for the perfect opportunity. This is where cash itself becomes the advantage. A car breaks down out of nowhere, a house hits the market underpriced, the market drops 20% overnight, a business becomes available for a fraction of what it's worth. Having cash on hand means you can act the moment the price is right. Without cash, you don't get to choose the moment. You buy a car when the old one finally stops working, not when a good deal shows up. You borrow when the emergency hits, not before. You sell investments when you need the money, not when it's smart to sell. The wealthy person's advantage isn't spotting better deals, it's being able to wait for them. Patience gets sold as a personality trait. It isn't. It's a bank balance. You can only wait for the perfect opportunity if waiting doesn't cost you something you can't afford to lose. Everyone else is patient the exact same way everyone else is calm during a car alarm they can't afford to fix. Waiting takes cash. Not touching your cash takes something else entirely, and it's the one that gets people yelled at by their own financial advisor. Number 2, never touch your investments. Fantastic advice if you can afford emergencies without touching them. Compounding works best when money stays invested and nobody panics, but staying disciplined requires something that lives outside the investment account entirely: a cash cushion. Emergency savings, stable income, insurance that actually covers things, expenses that don't eat the whole paycheck. All of it lowers the odds you're ever forced to sell at the worst possible moment. So wealth builds a feedback loop. The cushion protects the investments. The investments keep compounding untouched. Compounding builds more wealth, which builds a bigger cushion. It's less a strategy and more a very slow, very boring snowball. It's not that poorer investors are worse at holding on during a crash. It's that some people never get the chance to find out because the market crashed and they needed groceries. Picture 2 people watching the same crash. One has 6 months of expenses sitting in a savings account and leaves the investments alone. The other has nothing else to draw from, is forced to sell while the market is down, and locks in the loss.
Same market, same drop, completely different outcome, and it had nothing to do with who understood investing better. Everything on this list so far has been about one piece of the puzzle. The last one is the whole reason any of it works at all. Number 1. Make your money work for you. This one ties the whole video together. It's one of the most repeated sentences in personal finance, and it's true. But money can't do much work until you've already accumulated some. 5% on 1,000 is 50. 5% on 100,000 is 5,000. 5% on 1 million is 50,000. Same percentage, same return, wildly different consequence. Once you have capital, you can buy in larger quantities, buy better assets, skip expensive financing, and say yes when the opportunity shows up instead of watching it pass by. It's the same advantage showing up again and again under a different name. All of it comes from having enough money that a single bad month doesn't knock the whole plan over. None of this means financial advice is useless unless you're already rich. That's too cynical, and it isn't true. Buy quality, invest for retirement, avoid debt you don't need, own assets, let your investments compound. All of it still holds up. What gets left out is that money changes the rules of money. When you don't have much of it, you're constantly optimizing for today. What can I afford today? What bill has to get paid today? What happens if the car breaks down today? Once you have enough breathing room, you start optimizing for years instead of days. You can spend more upfront to spend less overall. You can wait for a better opportunity. You can leave the investments alone. You can survive a mistake without it wrecking everything else. That's one of the least talked about advantages of having money. It makes good financial advice easier to actually follow. Everyone gets the same advice, only some people get the option to take it.